Good morning, welcome back. You have been listening to a series of lectures in soft skills, and in the previous lecture we talked about organizational communication. But then you all know that we do not communicate only in organization and only with an organizational purpose. We also communicate at homes, we communicate with friends, with relatives, with seniors and juniors at the workplaces. And the nature of this communication, since varies from one context to another, at times because of certain regions we are not able to communicate properly or effectively. Now, in this lecture we are going to talk about communication breakdown. But before letting you know what we mean by breakdown, let me tell you a very small story which is from a famous essayist, A.G. Gardiner's On Saying Please. The incident is that a passenger enters the lift and says, "Top." The liftman says, "Top please." The passenger once again says, "Top." At this, the liftman throws the passenger out of the lift. Now, this is very small. This is actually, and when it was inquired, it was found that the liftman wanted some sort of courtesy from the passenger, whereas the passenger denied to respond to the courtesies, and when the entire case was examined, this was actually a case of communication breakdown. Now, the question is, when you are communicating with a person, you do not know the nature as well as the expectation of the other party. When this liftman was asked why he did so, it was found that the liftman was not treated properly in his house. Now, this was actually a sort of reaction. So, when people communicate, all of us have some preoccupied ideas. But when we communicate, sometimes we do not leave those preoccupied ideas and we communicate, and in such a moment of communication we do not communicate exactly what we want. You will come across many such instances. Let me ask you to imagine the following situations. Imagine a small child crying continuously, and when the child cries, because crying is also a sort of communication, the child actually wants to say something. The mother comes and simply provides her the bottle of milk, and the child is yet crying. The mother comes again and finds everything is fine, but the child cries continuously. It is later found that the child was feeling quite uneasy because the bed on which the child was sleeping was wet. Now, the question is, the mother could not understand in the very first instance what was the reason of the child's crying, and hence she could not find out the solution. Later, when she saw that the bed was wet and she changed, the child stopped crying. So, this is a case of communication breakdown or communication barrier. There is another case you can also imagine. You are going to travel to Bangalore for an interview. You have booked your tickets well in advance, and the date for your travel is 25th. and the time is night. So very carefully you have packed everything and you go to the station. You also board the train, but then you find that somebody else is occupying your seat. On inquiry, he says that the seat is his and he shows you a ticket also. Now, when you look at the ticket, you are dumbfounded. The TT comes and on an inquiry, he says, your train departed only last night. It is later that you realize that your train for which the ticket you have bought, the departure time was 12:30, and in railways the dates change after 12. Now, this is again a sort of breakdown or barrier, either because you did not know or you perhaps skipped. Same is the case when you visit a doctor and the doctor prescribes some medicine, and then you start taking that medicine very seriously, and yet you feel that the problem still persists. Actually, what the doctor had done is, the doctor had written a word like SOS while prescribing a particular tablet, and the doctor was under the impression that you will understand the meaning of this SOS. Perhaps you ignored, because the meaning of SOS is, it is actually to be taken when required, when the pain persists for a long time, but you skip the fact, and that is why the communication breakdown. Likewise, you write an electronic mail in a very beautiful language to one of your foreign friends and the reply does not come. You later realize that either your letter was too long or your email was too short. So you come across different ways of communication breakdown, which we also call communication barrier. Now, what is this communication barrier? If you look at this situation, you will find that communication barrier is when you start a communication process, some way or the other, there is something that either blocks, restricts, or interferes with the smooth flow of message. And since the message does not go smooth, since the message does not achieve its required purpose, it ends in a breakdown. That is why when you come across a communication breakdown, you really feel very embarrassed. But then here in these two lectures, I am going to discuss how you should be quite careful when communicating so that the communication crisis does not happen. Now, how to do that? You have to understand why things go wrong. What was actually the reason behind this communication breakdown or barrier? And then what could be the solution? Once you realize the problem, you do not succeed just in one interview, but you will feel in course of time that when you start making a sort of review of what the questions were asked and how you responded, you will come to a realization that this could have been answered in a different way, and you utilize that in another interview, and in this process you learn and you also become successful. Same is true of communication barriers also. You create a communication barrier, but when you realize, you perhaps try to improve it and you become successful. So while you are going to identify what caused this barrier, you can also find about various alternatives or solution, and depending upon the situation, you have to apply the best solution and then see feedback, and you will find that you have been successful. Now, dear friends, this communication barrier cannot be confined only to one situation. In life, situations change, new and new situations, new and new circumstances emerge every now and then, and that is why you have to understand that how this breakdown or barrier can be classified. This barrier can either be at the source. Now you know well because we have already discussed that communication is actually a process of sharing information between the two, where there is a sender, there is a receiver. So on majority of occasions there is a problem or there is a breakdown at the source. You as a sender, you are the source. How you manipulate the information, how you create the communication, that totally depends upon you. So some way or the other there may be some lapse in the way you form the message, you create the message. There can also be breakdown between people. I mean, you do not communicate alone, but you communicate alone also, because communication, as we have discussed, can be intrapersonal when you are communicating to yourself. It can be interpersonal when you are communicating either with some 2 people, 3 people, so with groups of people, and there also can be communication breakdown in the organization, because ultimately, because as we have said earlier, all of you belong to organizations and you will have to communicate in the organization. So these 3 types of communication barrier, how do they arise and how best we can guard them, or if it has already happened, how we can overcome them and try to warn ourselves or to make ourselves guard against such barriers, we shall discuss. Now, what is this breakdown at the source? So when we say breakdown at the source, we mean breakdown with the sender. I mean, you as a sender, you create a message, and when you create a message either in a spoken form, you create a message in the written form. Nowadays you have lot of channels available at your disposal, and that is why when you are creating the message, and you create the message depending upon the situation or the circumstance. So initially what happens, you start faltering with words. Say for example, you have to write a letter or an application for leave. Nowadays it is very difficult, because of the profligacy of these channels of information. Many of the youngsters, they still find it difficult as how to write a leave application, because in a way these communication technologies have threatened our language and have blocked at times. We have a system where we fill in the leave, and you come to know. But if you have to write, but then this is not one example. There are many such examples where you need to write, where you need to speak, where you need to express, where you need to share, where you need to communicate, where you need to belong, and for all these you need some sort of communication strategy. So when you are communicating, and sometimes you may come across a very difficult situation, and in this difficult situation, when you are going to write a message, what happens is you start thinking for words, you start faltering for words as to what words should be more suitable. Then on many occasions you are not certain about the content. If you understand why you are going to write this message, why you are going to make this call, why you are going to address a particular group, then depending upon the need, what you do is you are going to decide the content. So on many occasions you are not confident of the content, and then there can be differing backgrounds. All of us, we come from different backgrounds. Since we are brought up in different circumstances, in different ambiences, our tastes, habits, as we have been discussing since the beginning, we tend to develop a sort of background in which we are brought up. But then what we do is, our background, it affects our communication. Say for example, if I talk about a literary piece today, and if I say, oh yes, Mr. X, if you read that book you will find this, so you will find after some time this person will start showing his disinterest in you, and the reason is because he has not read that book, or he never intends to read that book. So this is a case of different background. all communication will have a sort of homophily, I mean common frame of reference. That is why to computer engineers they will talk very smoothly, to doctors they will talk very smoothly, to lawyers they will talk very smoothly, because they have a common reference. Sometimes when on a particular subject both the parties are interested, they will have a better communication. And on many occasions you have wrong inferences. These wrong inferences, what are these? You will find, you remember that famous illusion that sometimes when you are walking, and if it is just the start of the evening, even a small rope can appear to be a snake. So this is one example of inference. Initially this is not a snake, this is only a rope, but you suddenly come to the conclusion that it is a snake. So this is every individual makes his or her inferences according to his own psyche. And then there can be differences in perception. All people in this world, they are having different perceptions. They do not respond to the same situation the way you expect them. Everyone's perception is his own, and you will also come across, even you will also feel yourself that you come across some people who are of rigid categories. Now what are these rigid categories? These rigid categories are, say for example, when one day you are invited to a talk, and this talk is on nanotechnology, and you are a student of nanotechnology, you have done so many papers on nanotechnology, and then you start believing, oh, will there be something new in nanotechnology? No, you have learnt a lot on nanotechnology. Everything in that area you know, and then you decide not to go there. And even if you go there, you actually create such a situation, you either whisper to your friend, oh, what he is saying is of no significance, I know more than this. Now this is actually a syndrome where you feel you know everything. This is you act, and moreover you feel that there can be no further innovation, there can be no further knowledge in this regard that you really require. So and at times you have a sort of frozen evaluation also. You sometimes believe, if sometime one day you miss the train, and the next day when you go, you actually go 10 minutes or say sometimes 15 minutes earlier to the station in the hope that maybe you will miss the train again. So you never know that situations change, things change, and this time the train itself is delayed. So this is a sort of frozen evaluation, and on many occasions you start blindering, you feel that the situation will happen time and again. Dear friends, change is the law of nature. Every now and then things change, and people also have to change. So that is why when you are communicating, see to it that when you become very rigid, you cannot communicate too much. Then comes categorical thinking. You will often come across people, as I said, who will say, all the people in this organization, they are against me. All I say or do is taken negatively. All sorts of information which are being flowing, they are flowing only from computer language. They have not given any importance to written communication. Now this appears when you start feeling that you are a person of categorical thinking. You suffer from a sort of allness syndrome. Every now and then when you will talk, these words will appear all, every, fine, every now and then. So you ensure, you actually announce to the outside world that you know everything, and that is why you are not able to communicate. And when you do that, and when you communicate in such a situation, this will result in a sort of communication breakdown. Now we're talking about breakdown between people, which we also can call interpersonal communication. Now this interpersonal communication, it actually happens not in your everyday life, but you will find in organizations also. So in such a situation, what happens is, you have a different sort of perception, and this perception of reality, your perception of reality will be totally different from others' perception of reality. You know, people have different sorts of perception about looking at or viewing at things. At times you have a limited vocabulary. No, sometimes what you do is, since you have a limited vocabulary and you do not understand that one word may have so many meanings, if you rely only upon, say, if you rely only upon one word and you rely upon only one meaning, it will become very difficult. You know, there are situations when you have to tide over, when you have to overcome, when you have to come out of that. And if you believe only in one word, if you have a very limited vocabulary, you cannot have a proper communication. So there can be a breakdown between people. You know, when you say, let us take a word like fast, you know, you use the word fast. Now this word fast can be used differently by different people. Say for example, if I say, you are very fast. Now I have left something here when I say you are very fast. Maybe the other person may say, fast regarding my speed, fast regarding my dealing, fast regarding, or does it have some other meaning? Because you know, the words can be used idiomatically at times, and in particular context, when a particular word is used, it may be taken in differently or maybe interpreted differently by different people. And then there can also be a breakdown because of emotional outburst. Every now and then we are not in a proper mood. We are full of emotions sometimes. That is why we often say, if you are emotionally surcharged, either you know, excessive of anger, excessive of love, excessive of sentiments. So in such situation, when you communicate, sometimes you are excessively tired. So if you are communicating, you do not have a control over words. You do not, you know, you perhaps ignore some other facts also about how a use of particular word will be reacted to by the receiver. And then during such emotional outbursts, you are not able to communicate effectively, and whatever you communicate, say for example, a modern day professional who is surrounded by all sorts of gadgets. He is working on his laptop. At the same time a phone call comes and he starts attending that phone call, and at the same time some other pieces of information come with the support system from some other division. And if you are concentrating on a particular piece of work, you will find that this will become incomplete. For example, you forget, or you tend to forget, or you tend to skip over some of the words which could have been used there. And then poor listening. In a previous lecture, we talked about how people listen and why listening is very important. You know, if you are, on majority of occasions people do not listen, but remember, when you are communicating with a purpose, listening becomes very important. There are different factors which impede listening. Sometimes maybe outside disturbances, sometimes because you are working in a room where you can, you know, many people often say, I can hear everything that people in the adjacent room says. Now in such a situation, what happens? You are listening, and the way you are listening, sometimes you are lost in your own thoughts. Will you be able to listen properly? You will not. So because of poor listening also, you communicate in a way that ends in a communication breakdown. And there is another way which is called communication selectivity. Every person listens to, as we have said earlier, listens to the piece of information which actually interests him. Say for example, and what he does is, he ignores the other part. Say you are appearing at an interview, and while a question is put, before understanding the entire question, you picked up one of the phrases or the clauses which you know and you start responding, you will find to your great shock that you have answered quite negatively. So this actually creates a sort of communication barrier or communication breakdown. Every person has a sort of communication selectivity, we use the word. You actually take out things which you understand, it is of interest to you, you forget about the other parts, and that is how you create a sort of communication barrier. Next is noise. Do you really feel that noise is a sort of disturbance? But I believe noise is a sort of communication, but then noise can also help you give a lot of excuses. Say when you are talking over telephone and you try not to supply the best piece of information and you try to make a sort of pretension, what you say, I am not able to hear your voice clearly, I am not able to concentrate on because there is a lot of noise, I am at a place where I am surrounded by a crowd and there is a lot of cacophony. But remember, when you are communicating, this noise also can be a deterrent. It can also stop the proper communication. It can also help in giving confused sounds that you utter, or sometimes if you are writing, it will also not help you concentrate. And then another important factor which helps or which destroys communication is the lack of proper balance between verbal and non-verbal messages. You speak a word, you speak a sentence, you are giving a direction, but at the same time the language that is there on your face or the way you react to may be different. So a careful communicator has to see, either if you are a leader or say if you are in the role of a decision maker, you have to understand that communication is very comprehensive, it is very subjective, and you have to look at both the verbal and the non-verbal. You say something in words, but the way it is said, that has a lot to mean. So please try to understand, and moreover, it will vary, as we have discussed in our lecture on culture and communication, that it varies from one culture to another. We have discussed how when during a communication you become silent, it can be understood differently by different people. Even while you are, there is an example that in Kenya, the son-in-law and the mother-in-law, they do not face each other when they communicate. Now this may be understood in a different manner in our cultures, because we believe that when you communicate in many countries, even for foreign assignments, even for initiating a dialogue between two countries, the women they are not sent. But then there may be other voices from some organizations that it is a sort of discrimination, because the entire world, as I said the other day, the entire world is global and there are diversity of cultures. So when you are communicating, you also have to be aware of these cultural considerations when you are communicating. Then we come to the perception. As I said, your perception and my perception to two things will be totally different. So we should not always believe that everyone's perception will be the same as ours. Here it is very pertinent to emphasize on how important is language. Language is a code, language is a code. So when you are using a language, you are actually transferring your thoughts. We have said and will repeatedly say that when you are using a particular word, you actually try to situate a particular meaning in it. But then how it will be reacted to, it depends entirely upon the receiver. Here it is of paramount importance as to what Mark Twain says, the difference between the right word and almost right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. Of course, the difference is too less, but this difference may create a lot of confusion when you are communicating. That is why when you communicate with a doctor, as I said in the beginning, the way he uses a language like SOS, unless you understand, since you do not understand and the doctor was under the impression that you understood it, but you kept on taking the tablets as you took other tablets, and this created a lot of problem. So that may be the case also. Say for example, when you are communicating with a person of different background and you say, may I request you to put in a word to your friend so that when I go for my passport, I may not have a difficulty. And your friend says, no, I will tell him. And while discussing your case, he will be very loyal. Now you start wondering as to what loyal, what does it mean? And then you perhaps realize that he could have said, instead of loyal, he could have used the term, he will be very kind, he will be very considerate, and not loyal. So the question is, when you are using a word or when you expect other party to communicate, you actually expect that this should be communicated in such a manner that words convey the real meaning of the intended message, and that is possible only when the receiver also enjoys. That is why the importance of background is very important. Moreover, you will also find that on many occasions you come across a barrier which arises because of a semantic gap. When I say semantic gap, what we mean is a sort of language gap, linguistic gap. At times many people, even you know, as a youngster, when you write something, you think that you should use some such words so that you can be appreciated for your mastery of words. But then you perhaps ignore the fact that this letter or this electronic mail or this message, when it reaches the other party, how he or she will react to. So there may be a semantic gap, and moreover, one word that you are using in one context may be understood differently. Say for example, if let us take the example of how the word sidewalk, which is used by people in the US, they use sidewalk, whereas others may use it as pavement, and in India we may say it is just a platform. So this is how they interpret, and because all of us use words according to our own knowledge, according to our own experience, according to our own background. But then this may not be true when it comes to be understood by other people. Similarly, when we say, when the Britishers say table a motion, the meaning is to act on, but the US people may understand to postpone. This is actually the way we use words. Dear friends, while we are communicating, we actually see that our basic intention has to be understood by the receiver, and that is why we say it has to be a cordial cooperation between the sender and the receiver. But sometimes we ignore the background of the other people, sometimes we ignore the knowledge of the other people, and we create a communication that is bound to be very destructive. And remember, when you are communicating, you actually want to, sometimes you want to speak what you think proper, but that may be improper also. Likewise, when I am communicating with you, I think that you might be understanding everything, and that is why I can speak at my liberty, but then that can at times be troublesome. Hence, the time has come not to burden your minds too much, and end this lecture by saying that communication is a sort of consideration, it is a sort of negotiation between the two people, and if any skip, if any if any channel, if any thought, if any word has not been spoken carefully, that may result in a sort of miscommunication. And communication means to unite, to divide. Communication means to make or bring people closer, not to make them distance. Hence, since I want you to be very close, I will not communicate further in this lecture. Rather, in the next lecture, when we will be talking, we shall see how more and more information, loading up more and more information can also end in a sort of breakdown. Thank you very much.